We asked if this hire was good for Kemba Walker. Is it good for Cody Zeller?
No.
Can we get the non-stat score sheet god Cody Zeller back?
That was a young player that he played immediately. If you're talking about,
And there's not many.
There's not many, but also to me, honestly, I put that on the organization. They did not. This is what I was talking about prior to this draft. In that Clifford era, in my opinion, they did not prioritize, other than MKG, they did not prioritize drafting players that were focused on the defensive end of the floor. Now, Cody Zeller was somebody that played really hard. And I think that, to me, playing hard, playing disciplined, and at least trying on the defensive end to understand what Clifford wants to do. If you're a young player, if you're James Bouknight, if you're JT Thor, if you're Kai Jones, if you're Mark Williams, that's it. He'll play. I think he will play you. Now, will he start you? I don't know. But will he play you? I think so. But Malik Monk was not committed on the defensive end of the floor, and they had issues.
Well, and also, this is part of the transition I want to make, because Malik Monk was a guy that infamously, I didn't even hear. I'm sure it was disparaging.
I said
Malik
you're
Monk.
welcome.
Yeah, yes, for sure. Let's go to the Malik Monk conversation, because Steve Clifford, infamously or famously, whatever you want to put on it, wanted Donovan Mitchell in the NBA draft. Rich Cho, last chance, ditch effort, because this is somebody that was going to get fired. And he decided to go with what was the consensus higher pick in Malik Monk. I loved Malik Monk coming out of the draft. A lot of people thought he was better than Donovan. Clearly, Donovan has had a way better career through the first, 5, whatever that they've had, their whole career so far, right? But I do think that probably played a part in Malik not getting a whole lot of time as a rookie. And then I think it was James Borrego who also fell out of favor with Malik. And so that means you can blame it on Malik if you want. I also think it was probably pretty hard. I know you do. Yes, we know. But I also don't think that Malik was given exactly the best situation when you go to a coach that actively didn't want you. Doug, Steve Clifford didn't want him. Like, that can't be a good start for any player. If your coach actively fights for another player, it can't be good for that player coming into the NBA. Mo Bamba, same thing with Orlando, right? Mo Bamba couldn't get much playing time, and it was weird at that point because you're like, what's going on? Mo Bamba is a guy that you should be giving at least some experience to see what they have, and yet Steve Clifford would decide to go with some other players. Like, you have some of those relationships that can scare you. I love Steve Clifford, the guy. I love him in media sessions, and there's been great basketball relationships that he's formed. There also have been some notable young relationships that have fell out of favor pretty damn quickly.
Yeah, the young player thing is an issue, and the reason why it's an issue is because Mitch Kupchak brought it up in his press conference that he wanted to see Borrego play the rookies more. James Bouknight, Kai Jones specifically wanted to see a little bit more. So how does that jive this season? And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with what James Bouknight and Kai Jones and JT Thor did over the offseason and the impression that they make on Clifford, on day one of when they all get together and figure this thing out. But, how does that jive with the fact that you've brought in this coach and really given him a win now mandate with that contract number? But I think you're right. I think outside of Mark Williams, who is sort of the guy you kind of need, and fits a little bit of what Clifford likes, I think, out of players in general. I think this is probably bad for not only young players, but fringe players who are looking for a shot.
Well, let's talk about those young players even more so, because I think Mark Williams is probably the perfect transition as far as significance to this team, being the newly acquired player. Is it good for him? Yes, because Mark Williams is defense first, clearly, which fits the mold and what Steve Clifford wants to coach, but also he is a first-year player, and that pretty much goes against what Steve Clifford wants out there on the floor. So ultimately, you just don't have another player like Mark Williams. I think Mark is a guy that wants to be good too. We've shown that improvement from the first year at Duke, the last 10 games leading into this past season where he really was awesome. And I think ultimately, if you force me to choose, I do think it's actually a good hire for Mark Williams. The other young player that matters for this team is James Bouknight. And Doug, I don't think this is a good hire for James Bouknight. Now, to be fair, James Borrego being here wasn't going to be good for James either.
I almost got in a fight.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think Steve Clifford is going to be great for the second year pro out of UConn.
It doesn't feel good, and it makes me think that if they do make any more maneuvers this offseason, James Bouknight could, be part of. Don't aggregate that. I'm not hearing anything rumors. That's my feeling on the situation is that if you're going to move one of these rookies, feels like Bouknight would be the rookie to move. On the Mark Williams thing, I will say that one of his question marks or weaknesses is in defensive rebounding. So, and his physicality underneath, which is something we know. Clifford, I mean, he wants you banging on the boards, baby. Like that's defensive rebounding. He has these things. I'm trying to remember. I think he called them like in his last run, he called them like, no, it's things that were like not debatable. Like you have to do these things. There's a phrase I'm missing there. It's kind of a common phrase, but I'm missing it. Non-starters. I don't know. The things that you have to do. And one of them is defensive rebounding and getting a body on a body. So for Mark Williams, that's going to be the big thing. We know you can block shots. Can you come in here, get physical underneath, get those defensive rebounds? So that's on that. Bad for the offensive rebounding numbers because this was a team last season and the season before that sort of made some hay on the offensive boards. It was a Borrego. Borrego sort of tended to like that crashing the glass is sort of some easy offense. But that's not Clifford is all about getting back in transition, not letting everybody crash the glass. So that's going to be interesting too, right? With LaMelo Ball. Because we know LaMelo Ball, now he did let MKG do that. If you're really good, you got the length, you got the sort of that Dennis Rodman-like, sense for where the ball is going to be, then I think Clifford lets you do that. It's just that he doesn't let everyone do that. He wants you getting back in transition. So, I don't know if there's going to be conflict there, but I can see, LaMelo Ball being one of the only players that's allowed to crash the glass on the offensive rebounds.
Well, and the thing about MKG real quickly too is like when you talk about MKG being that prospect that was most known for defense, man. I mean, he was a legendary defensive prospect. That guy was insane and was good at it. A lot of people hate on MKG. Fair. Wasn't Bradley Beal? But defensively, he was awesome, and there were numbers to suggest that this team was better with him on the floor for a while.
Let's get serious. How many rings does Bradley Beal have?
Exactly. He doesn't have any. More like Devin Snooker, right?
He's got the same number as MKG. That's the answer.
That's true. Fans, we said it was good for the fans that wanted them to get back on defense. Who is this not good? Who are the fans that this is not a good hire for?
Well, look, if you're a fan that was hoping for big name, next level, new, shiny, somebody that you could have some good feelings about, that you could go to your buddies, oh man, the Hornets just hired Mike D'Antoni, 50 wins, 60 wins, baby, Eastern Conference Finals. Like if you were trying to get that kind of hype, we've given you a lot of information in this episode. I think you can walk away from this episode. If you're rational, if you're reasonable, and I get fan is fanatic, it means that sometimes you're not rational. You are not reasonable. Totally understand that. But if you are those things, I think you can walk away from this episode understanding that there is a road that leads to this working out. It's just the probability of that road seems kind of low. And the PR behind this is really, who is this hire bad for? The Hornets, in terms of their public relations effort to sell this thing, is going to be difficult. To sell this thing as a move towards a bright future with LaMelo Ball is going to be a tough sell until and if we see it actually happen on the court. Until then, Walker, this reeks of desperation. This reeks of a team that was spurned by Kenny Atkinson, couldn't make a deal with Mike D'Antoni. Rumors that the Kenny Atkinson deal fell apart because of assistant coaching, wanting to keep assistant coaches that you already had on the books. And that may play a part in this. If we see that some assistant coach, now here's how it could be sold. Hey, Clifford is not a player development focused coach. So you'd want to bring in some assistants that have good track records in player development. They have a few of those on their staff already. So let's keep those familiar faces for the Booknights, for the Kai Jones, for the JT Thors on the staff. That's how it'll be sold. But in reality, it's getting Clifford, who needed a job, who wanted a job, who wanted to get back into the game, familiar face, has a relationship with Jordan that was good. Jordan seemed to not regret, but feel bad about having to move on from Clifford. Has had a past relationship with Mitch Kupchak in LA. And this hire just seems to be like, well, let's go get the guy that will probably be amenable to all of the demands that Mike D'Antoni might not have been amenable to.
Yeah, I want to just kind of go rapid fire with some of these other players. I do have one point I want to sum up with. Kai Jones is interesting because Kai Jones seems a guy, if you know who Kai is, you have a problem if you don't like who he is as a dude, right? Like it's you, because Kai is an amazing guy. His character is through the roof. He is the most fun player who is also an extremely raw project that the Hornets knew what they were getting into when they drafted him. So what does that look like with this specific coach and how that can all progress?
Same note on Mark Williams that I have for Kai Jones. His success and his ability to stay on this team and get minutes under Clifford is going to depend on his commitment to defensive discipline, for learning the game, for understanding the defensive end of the floor, and for committing. So I see these videos of Kai Jones putting up a lot of 3-point shots. I see him working on his jump shot. I don't see him down low. I don't see him doing, I don't see him, multi-level. Maybe it's happening and we're just not seeing the video, but that's the question mark I have about Kai Jones. Is he, and the way he wants to play the game, going to necessarily fit with Clifford? And you're listening right now and you're saying, why does Kai Jones, this great prospect that they spent a first round pick, wouldn't spend it on Jalen Duren, by the way, wouldn't spend that first round pick on Jalen Duren, did 2 first-round picks last season. Why should that player have to fit with Steve Clifford? Why didn't they just find a coach that fit with Kai Jones, James Bouknight, and the future of this organization? And to you, I say, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's the situation we're in.
The last significant player I want to talk about.
I am. Oh man, this is. I just, the energy around this organization, because things are crazy right now. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. But I'm hyped.
It's bananas. It's nuts. It's all of those foods that indicate that it's chaotic, especially with this hire of Steve Clifford. Last player I really want to talk about, like Gordon Hayward. I don't know how much of a long part of the future he is. Some of these other guys. The last one I do think it's important to talk about is Terry Rozier, who also, we talk about the defensive side of the court. He can also shoot the lights out. Offensively, I don't think he's the greatest decision maker in the pick and roll. Also isn't the greatest ball mover, has gotten better, but also not significantly better in that role, has been a leader for this team. But how does that play out on the basketball court? Also trying to save some money because we do have the payroll situation to work out. I find that relationship pretty interesting going forward as well.
This hire to me says they are not done. They are going to continue. It feels like this organization is going to continue to look to move either one or both Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward, because I think they're going to move heaven and earth to sign Miles Bridges. Do they want to do that and retain and have to retain all of that talent and money and possibly go into the luxury tax? I don't think that's the priority of this organization. They don't feel like they're ready to be big spenders. And so if that means moving a Gordon Hayward for way less than you would expect on the value in return, or Terry Rozier, same kind of thing, I think they're going to look to do that. And do note that we're going to be we kind of had to devote this whole episode to Steve Clifford, but this week we got to go back to what happened at the draft. We've had a few days to think about it. We got to talk about Miles Bridges, because that moratorium ends on July 6th, and we're going to get some teams maybe putting in max offers, maybe Detroit, maybe San Antonio. And so we've got to break it all down. We're going to do it this week.
Yeah, I want to continue to do that. I want to give my overall take on Steve Clifford, because I feel listen, I'm so excited for this, Walker.
Right. I've been waiting all episode for your final thought take on Steve Clifford. I am ready. My body is ready. Give it to me.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that hype. I hope that we didn't overpromise and underdeliver at the end of this, but I do appreciate all of that hype coming into the take. Doug, we had talked about throughout this offseason what took place on draft night specifically, that it didn't seem this franchise had a plan. From going to Mike D'Antoni, to Kenny Atkinson, going back to Mike D'Antoni, who is going to be their next head coach? Why did they fire James Borrego? What direction did they want to go? Whether the name mattered or not, what was the philosophy they wanted to go with? And in the end, they end up with Steve Clifford as their head coach. And this is, to me, an example of this team truly not having a plan. Because when you go back to this franchise earlier, you could say, well, not all plan A's work out. It's time to go to a plan B. It's time to go to your plan C. In fact, good teams capitalize on those things that take place when option A doesn't work out. It happens all the time in every single professional sport. But Steve Clifford, you cannot convince me that he was ever a part of the original plan, whether it be second, third, fourth, fifth option. So when he's the guy that comes in as that next head coach, that says it's within a couple of days worth of time, mind you. That says to me, they made a decision that was nowhere on the original blueprint. And that scares me because we talk about all of this and through all walks of life, being prepared sets you up for success. Does this indicate that the Charlotte Hornets were prepared? My answer is no. And I think it's pretty easy to say that. You could argue that on draft night. It's a very easy way to argue that they were prepared on draft night. Hey, we like Mark Williams a lot. If we get a good enough offer that we deem able to trade Jalen Duren for, and we're just going to end up with Mark Williams at 15 anyway, we're going to pull the trigger on that. And boom, that's exactly what happened. We hated the Jalen Duren trade. We were all in love with that pick, and we don't find it very feasible to trade him for a 20 pick, most likely for the Denver Nuggets. But it's pretty easy to say they could have planned for that. How in the world do you sell me? Do you sell the fans? Do you sell any people in the world of basketball that this was always a part, no matter how far down the page, of your original plan? And that's what scares me about this franchise.
Well, Clifford was literally Clifford. The C in Clifford stands for Plan C. It was Kenny Atkinson, then it was D'Antoni. Now Clifford is absolutely Plan C. I'm giving an opportunity for it to all work out because I think the Hornets are going to get and deserve a lot of criticism and ridicule for this move. But if Clifford is able to come in, Clifford's never had even a player that had a potential to be a superstar. I mean, he had some young players in Orlando, but Jonathan Isaac's not going to be a superstar. Mo Bamba's not going to be a superstar. LaMelo Ball is the first opportunity he has to actually head coach some of the players that in the past he's had the opportunity to work directly with. And so I think that makes this somewhat interesting, but I get all of the fear. My final thought on all of this, Walker, are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm as ready as you were for my take, baby. Let's hear it.
We can finally 100% say that we can forget about Vogel.
Thank goodness. Miles Turner, not so much, but we can forget about Frank Vogel. Yeah, no more Frank Vogel. Instead, it's Steve Clifford making an appearance once again as the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets franchise. We're going to have you covered for the rest of the week, the rest of the offseason, with plenty more changes to come. Miles Bridges, restricted free agency. How is that all going to play out? You can listen to us daily here on the Locked On Hornets podcast by making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day as well with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks again.